Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Quilty Life with Jenn Burt. This episode is going to be about doing improv stack work. Now, what does that mean? So let's look at a couple of examples first so you get an idea of what I'm talking about here. So there's some other names for this that are sort of trademarked. Some people call this stack and whack or stack the deck, but I just call it stack work. It essentially just means you're going to take some stacks of fabric, you're going to cut them up and sew them back together again, which doesn't sound very complicated because it's not. So this quote right here was actually not done super improvisationally, but it is scrappy. So this is an individual block right here. So you can see it's underneath here. All right. So that's an individual block. And you can see that in each block, there's two little pieces that are sort of pointy and ones that are less pointy. And every single block has that. It has two pointies, two less pointies. And then I just did this scrappy. I piled up fabric and I cut them all exactly the same way. And I mixed them all up and I sewed them together. And then when I decided how to put the blocks together, I didn't do this on purpose. I did this part improvisationally. I said, oh, it looks kind of cool when I put these fabrics that match together. So this one's forms sort of a big sort of fat shape. And when you do it with the pointies, you get these sort of stars. So that's how I ended up putting this quilt together. So I started out doing it. Every single one was measured precisely, but then so I could get the shapes that I wanted. But then I did it scrappy, and then I didn't decide how I was going to place it until after I'd made all of the blocks. So let's move on to this other example that I have, which is closer to the sort of thing that we're going to do today. So this is just a top. I've never actually quilted it. I need to do that at some point. But in this case, an individual block is here. They're very small, right? So what I laid down 4 fabrics basically, and then I cut them all the same way. I cut it this way, and then I cut it that way, and then I cut it that way, and then I mixed things up. And so what I ended up doing with them after I cut them all apart was I actually made deliberate decisions about how to put them together. So I put dark purples with dark purples. I put light blues with light blues, that sort of thing. And then I made each block sort of like a half square triangle where it had one color on one side, one color on the other. Then I arranged them where it's like dark, light, dark. You can see that. It's over and over again. And then in this direction, you have dark, light, dark. And then my grays, I ended up fading them from left. There's real light gray on this side and real dark gray. And then I just sort of did a gradation from there to there. So that's how I did this. So I did improv chopping, and then I sort of made some random decisions. You can see it's scrappy, like this piece here is obvious. It's all scattered around. So you can mix it up. You don't have to do everything improv. So that's what I did in these. We're going to do something similar to this today. Let me show you what we're going for here. So it's very similar to these. So the first cut, we go from here to here, and then we go from here to here, and then from there to there. So we're going to, in each piece of fabric, we're going to cut it up. So we have this basic shape. So then we can sew them back together. Now you can do this with every single shape you can imagine. So for example, remember those log cabin blocks from an earlier episode where you have this, and then you have this, and then you have this, and then you have that? Well, you could do these using the stack work method as well. You pile up a bunch of fabrics, and then you cut this log off, move those away. Then you cut that log off, move them away. And you keep going in. And then you've got a pile of pieces that are all going to fit together to make improv log cabin blocks that all look similar, but they won't be exactly the same. So any block that you can imagine, you can use stack work for. So let's give this a shot. All right, so I've pulled out these fabrics that I'm going to use to demonstrate this for you. So the block I've drawn here, I'm going to shoot for essentially doing that over here. So this is a 5-inch by 5-inch block. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull my fabrics that I'm going to use, and you can measure this if you want to, but I'm just going to do it pretty loose and easy. So I'm lining this up on my 10 line, so then that way I know if I cut right over here at 15, then I'm getting pretty close to the size that I want, and then I'll do it again same way. So I get approximately the size square that I was shooting for. And then I'll just repeat that with these others. And I'm actually going to cut them all at the same time. Let's leave that one on top so I can see where to cut. All right, so the reason I decided to do that was I want to be able to see all the layers. If this was farther down and I just randomly went in here and cut, I might have missed an edge or something. So I usually stack them up so I can see everything. So I make sure I get the sizes I'm after. That looks good. Cut right here. And then we're going to do the same thing in this direction. And now we've got approximately 5-inch squares to work with. So the reason I picked 4, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. I usually pick however many fabrics is however many sections there are here. You can go more than that. If you go less, then you end up having to double up. You might have to have 2 purples in the same block. So if you want them to be all 4 different fabrics, then you have to start with at least 4, right? Okay, so let's put these all in a pile or a stack, since we're calling this stack work, right? So we put them all in a pile. And now, you guys know from earlier episodes that this is usually the rotary cutter I use. It's small, it's handy, I like the ergonomics of it. I do have a bad boy big version though. So this is the 45 millimeter, which just refers to the size of the blade, of course. And this one's the 60. It'll get through more stuff without giving me any trouble. So when I'm doing multiple layers of fabric, I tend to bust this guy out. The first thing we're going to do is you have to find a cut that goes from edge to edge. If I try to cut this one first, that's obviously not going to work because I don't know where to stop, right? So I always look at my drawing. So usually what I'll do is I'll just take a piece of paper and sketch this out. I don't usually print it out on a computer like I've done here, or I'll cut the first ones and kind of set them to the side, and then that will be my reminder of how I did it. So that way, over time, I don't start changing it up in a way that it makes them more difficult to sew together. All right, so first cut. I'm going to go from here to here. So here to here. And this does not need to be measured or exact. I am going to use a ruler, so I have nice straight lines, but you could do this without a ruler if you wanted to. And I'm just going to cut from there to there. And then, see, okay, this line on this side goes from here to here at approximately that. And then this one goes from there to there on this one at approximately there. Okay, so now we have all of our pieces. Now what do we do with them? We are going to take one of each of these, slide it up a little so we have enough room, and then we're going to take one of each of these. We're going to kind of mix them up. You could do this in a more orderly way if you wanted to, or you can just do it like I'm doing and just throw them in there. All right, and I'm going to put that one there. And I am being careful not to duplicate fabrics, but that's not necessary. If you like that look with 2 purples, you can do that totally. It doesn't matter. So now I'm going to sew these together. Now, how am I going to do that? Let's push these to the side. We're going to do it in exactly the opposite order that we cut it. So the last cut that we made was this one. So we're going to sew those 2 together. Then these 2. And then we'll sew those back together. So whatever order you cut it in, just reverse the process and sew them together. So let's put these together. Now what I like to do is if you hadn't already seen, I love lunch trays. So these are very handy because you can put all of your pieces on here. like this. And then when you transport them over to your sewing machine, you don't lose your order. So I've done my first 2 seams on each of them. I sewed here and here on each one of them. And you can see they're each a little bit different, even though I cut them all in a stack. Sometimes when I put them together, I slid them a little to one direction or the other, and that's totally fine. But when you get to this point, you may find it helpful to straighten the edge up before you sew this piece on. So the way you could do that, just lay this here, and you can actually make a decision here and cut a little more off if you wanted to, and that'll make each of the blocks a little different from each other. So if that's what you're shooting for, then you can do that here. So this one's actually pretty straight. I could trim that up too if I wanted to. Right, and then I can make a decision. I can slide this farther down, or I can slide it up here. So each block can be exactly the same if you want to, or very close to the same, or you can make them quite different from one another. Just keep in mind, if you slide it down here, your final block, you're going to lose this, and you're going to lose some of this. So just keep that in mind and remember what you want your final block to look like. So you can make a lot of decisions here. All right, so I will sew those, but the other way that you can do this is just flip this over and just sew them together. Pick this line is what I would go. Just go down the side, sew your 1/4 inch seam allowance right there, and then afterwards come back and cut the extra off. That's totally legal as well. There's no rules, so you don't have to cut first, but some people like to be able to see the finished edge underneath their presser foot. So do the way that feels the most comfortable to you, or try it out both ways and see which one you like better. So here's where we are after we sewed this last seam on each of the blocks. Now, when I pressed these, I went in, so I hit it with a hot iron after I pressed it open, and then I set my tailor's clapper on top of it. That just makes things super, super flat, and you don't have to stand there and keep pressing it with your iron for forever. So what do I do with them now? So I can see they're all different sizes. I'm going to think about, do I want them all to be the same size? Do I need them to be the same size for whatever project I want to put them in? So you could come in here with a square ruler, bigger, smaller, however you need it, and then you could decide where you want to cut to make these the size that you want. However, in this case, we're just building all of these blocks that we're planning to put into something later, and we aren't sure what we're going to do with them. So what I would usually do at this point is just kind of square these up, because I know I can't use these edges over here really. So I would just come around and just sort of get it. That's already pretty straight. And then I would just get everything straight-ish. So that's what I would do at this point. And then if I want to come in later and cut them down more, I can. So I usually square things up, but you can do whatever you want. It's improv. Now, before we wrap up, I just want to remind you that we've done all of this very loose and easy, but if you flip it over and look at the back, I've used black thread so you can see, which I normally wouldn't do, but you can see I have maintained my seam allowances pretty well, and I have kept everything flat, and I don't have a bunch of weird lumps. Just because you're doing improv doesn't mean that you're doing messy or bad patchwork. It's still good sewing. It just is a little more liberated. So that's it. That's stack work. Pile them up, cut them all in the same direction or a little bit different, and then sew them back together all the same way or a little bit different, and then do whatever you want to with what you make out of it. So I hope you enjoyed learning about this, or seeing the way I do it if you already knew about this method, and that you'll go try and do some stack work for yourself. I hope you'll join me for the next episode of The Quilty Life with me, Jenn George Burt.